about you an African American. Africa was named after a white man named Scipio Africanus.
Greetings. Glory to God on the highest, and on earth, peace to people of goodwill. Really quick video here. I just want to comment on this tweet that I recently stumbled across. It's from last month. And in this tweet, the author of the tweet declares that the continent of Africa was actually named after Scipio Africanus. And I hope you forgive my pronunciation. I'm sure the author of the tweet would prefer that it be pronounced Scipio, and perhaps that's more in keeping with classical Latin pronunciation. But I hope you'll forgive me if in this video I run with a slightly more Italianate pronunciation, Scipio. But whatever the case, this particular claim has been floating around One West circles for decades. It's not a new claim amongst One Westers. In fact, it's been around for at least 30 years, and honestly, I would say significantly more than 30 years. For example, the version of Change of Worlds, which the ICUPK put out in the 90s, which was what I guess could be described as a meta-redaction, insofar that it's a redaction of a book by Edward Meredith Bibbins, the founder of One West, more popularly known in One West circles as Abba Bivens. And in that book, it stated that, quote, Africa was named after a white general, Leo Scipio Africanus, who conquered the land of Ham, end quote. Now, that claim has been made by a number of One West descended groups, and I'd like to show a few examples of One West descended groups making that claim within the last year or so. So here's a few clips. Listen to this, and fair use.
Right, the word Africa, right, or so-called African, right, comes from an actual so-called white man, right, named Leo Scipio Africanus, right, who conquered and took down the land of Ham, right, during, right, the Second Punic Wars, man, right, at the Battle of Carthage, man. Right.
Did you know the blackest continent on earth, Africa, was named after a white man? Did you know that, sis? Africa was named after Scipio Cornelius Africanus. Right. He was a Roman general during the Punic Wars. You're not African. Africa, before it was named Africa, was called the land of Ham. Right.
Asher, then you had the Second Punic Wars in which he lost, and that's when Africa became known as Africa, because it was named after Leo Scipio Africanus. You understand? But
furthermore, Africa's named after a white man by the name of Leo Scipio Africanus, who defeated Hannibal during the Second Punic Wars and renamed that territory after himself.
So when you call yourself African American, you're saying that you come from Leo Scipio Africanus, a white man.
This wasn't even called Africa. This was Leo Scipio Africanus. He named this place Africa.
Okay, so what I want to discuss in this video is the fact that that claim is mistaken. Africa, the continent of Africa, is not named after Scipio Africanus. Rather, it's the other way around. Scipio took on the additional name Africanus after his campaign in North Africa, in what was then called Africa, right? So, like I said, it's the other way around. Africa was not named after Africanus. Rather, Africanus, in terms of that additional name, was named after the continent, or after his successful campaign in that continent. And before I jump into the few sources I want to look at, I just want to put up a quick disclaimer that I don't intend this video as insulting towards anyone who has publicly taken that position. Actually, Matthew 5:22 was part of the gospel reading at masses today around the world. So God forbid I sink to insulting anyone's intelligence. I'll fully acknowledge that all of us have had moments in which we simply ran with a claim that we received from someone we trusted. So in that regard, I'll say that this video is as much a reminder to myself as anyone else that it's prudent to double check basically every claim we receive and pass on. But whatever the case, I just want to look at a few sources, 3 sources in particular, which were all available in the 90s and actually decades before the 90s, just to show that the actual fact of the matter was easily within reach, right? So I'm going to use sources that would have been at most major libraries in New York City, right? So first, I want to look at the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was published in 1911. And we're going to look at specifically the 19th volume. And I'm going to turn to page 158, which has the end of that volume's entry on the concept of name. And in particular, I want to look at this section here, which is on the concept of cognomen or cognomen, which is to say like a surname, and more specifically, what's known as a Agnomen, or in English it's more popularly called Agnomen, right? But here, I want to read this section right here, which reads, quote, in addition to these three regular names, many Romans had a fourth, Cognomen secundum. Agnomen was an introduction of the grammarians of the 4th century. These quote-unquote second surnames were chiefly bestowed in recognition of great achievements. And then it gives these examples, Asiaticus, Africanus, Creticus, etc., right? End quote. So the point of showing this entry is to highlight that Africanus took on this name in recognition of a great achievement, and that achievement was his victory in Africa. But perhaps that's not entirely clear from that entry alone, so I'd also like to look at this reproduction of an 18th century edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, in which the entries were more like dictionary entries. So this is the 1771 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and it's the first volume. And I want to turn to page 39 and look at the entry for Agnomen, or Agnomen is the more popular pronunciation in English. And it reads, quote, in Roman antiquity, a kind of fourth or honorary name given to a person on account of some extraordinary action, virtue, or other accomplishment. Thus, the Agnomen Africanus was bestowed upon Publius Cornelius Scipio on account of his great achievements in Africa. So once again, what this entry is touching on is it's not stating that Africa was named after Africanus, rather Africanus was named after Africa. And with that, let's look at one final source, that being the 1961 volume put out by the Loeb Classical Library. Loeb Classical Library's volume of Silius Italicus's Punica. And I'm going to turn to specifically pages 370 and 371. And on page 371, we find the following in reference to Scipio. Quote, to him Carthage shall surrender her arms, and Africa her name, end quote. So it's stating that Africa will surrender her name to Scipio. And then you'll notice there's a little superscript G there, which references a footnote. And so for that footnote, we need to go to the previous page, page 370. And when you look at footnote G, it reads, quote, he assumed the name of Africanus, end quote. All right, so I'm only showing this to establish that the claim that Africa was named after Scipio Africanus is mistaken. Scipio received the name Africanus from his victory in Africa, right? So essentially, he was named after Africa, not the other way around. And I hope you forgive me if it's been a bit repetitious, but I wanted to make that point and drive that point home. So I have this video on hand the next time someone makes that claim, right? It's a claim that's been floating around One West circles for decades. But I'm sorry, the claim is mistaken, and I would encourage people to stop making that claim and to actually look into it. But with that, I'll close this video here. As always, I welcome any comments, questions, criticisms, or objections. So feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative, and God bless.